Hello again. So I just got through talking about Bag of Bones, and as I said at the end of that review, when I finished reading that book, I just decided I wanted to go back and reread his first published novel because that book is one of his more mature works, and it's very much a kind of thematic novel. It's not so much about plot, whereas this is just pure story, even though it is also a very clever, intelligent book, but it is first and foremost just a breakneck paced story. So, Carrie, everyone knows it. I'm guessing everyone watching this has certainly seen one of the films because there's three different versions of it now, but you've probably seen De Palma's version. The cover art is fantastic by Tony Mazzaro. It's borrowed from the film, but it's still great. 200 and odd pages. The back, I will read it. I know you all know the story, but it's worth reading because it's a good synopsis. It's well written. Carrie White is no ordinary girl. Carrie White has a gift, the gift of telekinesis. To be invited to prom night by Tommy Ross is a dream come true for Carrie, the first step towards social acceptance by her high school colleagues. But events will take a decidedly macabre turn on that horrifying and endless night as she is forced to exercise her terrible gift on the town that mocks and loathes her. Yeah, like I said, everyone's seen at least one of the films. De Palma's is the most famous, but there have been two other versions of that film. There's one with, what's she called? Chloe Grace Moretz, is it? And then there was another one made for TV, which is really interesting. It has a very different ending, an ending that I liked very much, although it does take away from the tragedy of this book. And then there's The Rage, Carrie 2, which is another very well worth checking out film. But enough about the films, the book. It's a quick read. Legend has it that King tossed the manuscript in the bin and his wife Tabitha rescued it from there. Personally, I don't quite believe that legend. I think it's just a kind of he himself, I don't, to my knowledge, has never actually said that. If I'm wrong, please do correct me in the comment section. But it seems to be just like an apocryphal myth that's grown up around this book. Because I don't. Why would he do that? I mean, I've read, I think, every published word by Stephen King, including all the stuff he had published before this novel, and there's some absolute garbage in there. His short story work, I mean. Whereas this is a masterpiece. Why would he toss this out but keep all the rubbish that he was writing before then and publish it in men's magazines? It doesn't make sense to me. But maybe it's true, and maybe he did have his reasons for tossing it, whatever. But yeah, Carrie. So a telekinetic schoolgirl who is, she's an ugly duckling, and she's being bullied and picked on by her classmates, and this gift that she has boils and roils inside her, and eventually she uses it to take revenge on the town that is making her life a misery. In one sense, the book can be read as a kind of a one big metaphor for womanhood and girlhood changing into the power of womanhood. King had a lot of books and stories which are about the power of the female, the power of the feminine. He idolized his mother because his father walked out on the family, and he and his brother David were raised by Ruth, his mother, and some of his books are dedicated to her. And it's very, very obvious that King, she was like his, what would you say, his paradigm of the feminine, of the strong, powerful, nurturing, protecting mother who, even though she'd been kicked in the teeth by life and by her husband, she dusted herself off and found her strength and did what she had to do, which is raise her sons. Lots of very powerful, strong women in King's fiction. Dolores Claiborne, another one, for example. Uh, Carrie would, I suppose, be his first attempt at describing the often frightening power of woman. And I think it's just an amazing book. I mean, he after this he would write so many classic horror novels. Like immediately after this would come Salem's Lot, The Shining, The Stand, and then as we go into the 80s, he was putting out stuff like It, which is an absolute masterpiece. But this is such a brave, confident novel. I mean, it's written in an interesting style. It's a combination of the usual narrative style, but interspersed with journal entries and bits of graffiti. It's similar to Bram Stoker's Dracula in that it's told in a very unusual form, in the form of letters and doctors' reports, various biographies and academic textbooks of what happened. It's a very creative way of telling this story, and it works so well. It's a brilliantly controlled piece of fiction. It's so well orchestrated. There's not a wasted line. I mean, Stephen King would later be perhaps guilty of graphomania. In other words, the compulsive need to just write and write and write. So sometimes, as his career went on, he'd have some books which could have been 300 pages, but they ended up being 600 pages, looking in the direction of stuff like Duma-Key and arguably the Tommyknockers and stuff like that. But this is so economic. It is not a word is misplaced, not a sentence is out of place. But even though it's a very short novel, he manages to create one of his most tragic characters. Carrie White is up there with the great King creations, even though he thought her up when he was a young man of 26, 27. It's such an intelligent creation. You feel bad for her. She's the prototype of the Stephen King geeky school kid. There would be many of them in the books to come. Arnie Cunningham in Christine, for example, and the Losers Club from it. But Carrie, like I said, is the kind of the blueprint for all that would follow. And he really gets this type of character. King's unparalleled skill as a writer was writing kids, in my opinion. I don't think anyone has come close to him of his generation of writers in any genre of being able to understand the world through the eyes of young children and adolescent children, teenagers, and then young adults. He's simply unparalleled at that. Yeah, and Carrie is a moving story. I mean, I've read this a whole bunch of times, but I reread it most recently just after I finished Bag of Bones, and I was surprised at just how moved I was by the end of it. Even though I know what's gonna happen, and we all do. So spoiler coming, even though you know the story. Even though I know she's gonna die, it still breaks my heart for this character to end this way, because she does get a revenge on the town, but small consolation when she ends up getting literally buried by the town that tried to bury her all her life. Margaret White is well depicted. That's always a dangerous type of character to take on, the religious fanatic, because it can become very cliched and stereotypical when you've got the fundamentalist lunatic. But I mean, Piper Laurie in De Palma's film is a bit histrionic. It's all right. I mean, it was the 70s, so it's a very 70s performance from her. And then Julianne Moore in the later version of the film, she goes for a slightly more restrained performance, slightly less insane, but probably more disturbing because it's like this seething mass of insanity which he keeps somehow pent up in this veneer of normality. In the book, yeah, Margaret White is a frightening character because she's one of those dangerous people who believe they're doing right and they think that gives them a mandate to abuse. And anything is permissible if you think it's been done in the name of God. So brilliant characters, so deftly and swiftly drawn. Everything is just so full of life in this book. Nothing is dead in it. There's not a dead word or sentence. Every character is fully fleshed out in a matter of just a few sentences or a paragraph. He's able to just conjure up who this person is, whether it's Tommy Ross, the guy who takes Carrie to the prom, Susan Snell, the girl who wrestles with should I be with the in crowd or should I do what I know is right and look out for this downtrodden person. Yeah, brilliant characters. A fantastic book, the greatest debut horror novel of all time, if we don't consider Dracula to be a debut horror novel, which I don't. Which I'll explain why when I review that novel. Yeah, it's a masterpiece. So, like I said, I mean, I don't really need to say much more about it because you've all read it. If you haven't read it, you need to. It is a staple of the horror genre. Published in 1974, it would kickstart the career of the most significant horror writer, in my opinion, in history. And I include Edgar Allan Poe, H.P. Lovecraft in that, because you could argue that those guys, were perhaps better writers, if that matters. But could you argue that either of those guys shaped the world's awareness and consciousness of horror like Stephen King? I mean, you go to any average person on the street and ask them to tell you 10 characters from Edgar Allan Poe or H.P. Lovecraft, and then ask them to tell you 10, not just characters, but novels by King or films they've seen from his work. I think that this guy I'm rambling now, I know, but when I get onto the subject of King, I'm probably going to do that. That's why I'm not planning to do a series of King. I'm not going to do all of his novels because, again, they've been done to death by everyone on YouTube. But these are just two books that I want to talk about, Bag of Bones and Carrie. So let me quit while I am probably slightly behind now. Carrie from 1974, masterpiece, fantastic, love it to bits. And oh, for the golden age of cover art in horror. How I miss it. Thanks for watching, everyone. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you soon with a review of The Exorcist is coming up. I'm halfway through rereading William Peter Blatty's The Exorcist, so that's going to be next. Thank you very much, and bye for now.